The complete work of Swami Vivekananda, Volume 1, Section 4, Volume 1 and Section 4, Lectures and Discourses. First, Soul, God and Religion. Through the vista of past, the voice of centuries is coming down to us. The voice of the sages of the Himalayas and the recluse of the forest. The voice that came to the Semitic races. The voice that spoke through Buddha and other spiritual giants, the voice that comes from those who live in the light that accompanied man in the beginning of the earth, the light that shines wherever man goes and lives with him or forever, is coming to us even now. This voice is like the little rivulets that comes from the mountain. Now they disappear, and now they appear again in a strong flow till finally they unite in one mighty majestic flood. The messages that are coming down to us from the prophet and holy men and women of all sects and nations are joining from their forces and speaking to us with the trumpet voice of the past. And the first message it brings us is peace be up to you and to all religions. It is not a message of antagonism, but of one united religion. Let us study this message first. At the beginning of this century, it was almost feared that the religion was at the end. Under the tremendous sledgehammer blows of the scientific research, our old superstitions were crumbling away like masses of porcelains. Those to whom religion meant only a bundle of creed and meaningless ceremonies were in despair. They were at their wit end. Everything was slipping between their fingers. For the time, it seemed inevitable that the surging tide of agnosticism and materialism would sweep all before it. There were those who did not dare utter what they thought, and he thought the case hopeless and the cause of the religion lost once and forever. But the tide has turned, and to the rescue has come what? The study of comparative religion. By the study of different religions, we find that in essence they are one. When I was a boy, this skepticism reached me, and if seemed for a time as if I must give up all hopes of religion. But fortunately for me, I studied the Christian religion, the Mohammedan, the Buddhist, and others. And what was my surprise to find that the same foundation principle taught by my religion were also taught by all religions. It appeals to me this way. What is the truth? I asked. Is this true world is a truth? Yes. Why? Because I see it. Are the beautiful sound we hear either vocal or instrumental music? Is it true? Yes. Because we hear them. We know that man has body, eyes, ears, and he has spiritual nature where we cannot see. And with this spiritual faculty, he can study this different religion and find that whether a religion is taught in the forest or jungle of India or in the Christian land, is essentially all religions are one. This only shows us that the religion is the constitutional necessity of the human mind. The proof of one religion depends on the proof of all the rest. For instance, if I have 6 fingers and no one else has, you may well say that is abnormal. The same reasoning may be applied to the argument that only one religion is true and all others false. One religion alone, like one set of 6 fingers in the world, would be unnatural. We see therefore that if one religion is true, all others must be true. There are differences in non-essential, but in essentials they are all one. If my 5 fingers are true, they prove that your 5 fingers are also true. Wherever man is, he must develop a belief, he must develop his religious nature. And another fact I find in the study of the various religion of the world is that there are three different stages of ideas with regard of the soul and God. In the first place, all religions admit that apart from the body which perishes, there is a certain part or something which does not change like the body, a part that is immutable, eternal, that never dies. But some of the later religious religions teach that although there is a part of us that never dies, it had a beginning, but anything that has a beginning must necessarily have an end. We, the essential part of us, never had a beginning and will never have an end. And above us all, above this eternal nature, there is another eternal being without end, God. People talk about the beginning of the world, the beginning of the man. The word beginning simply means the beginning of the cycle. It nowhere means the beginning of the whole cosmos. It is impossible that certain could it is impossible that creation could have a beginning. No one of you can imagine a time of beginning. That which has a beginning must have an end. Never did I not exist, nor you, nor will any of us ever hereafter cease to be, says the Bhagavad Gita. Wherever the beginning of creation is mentioned, it means the beginning of the cycle. Your body will meet with death, but your soul never. Along with the idea of the soul, we find another group of ideas in regard to its perfection. The soul in itself is perfect. The Old Testament of the Hebrews admits man perfect at the beginning. Man made himself impure by his own action, but he is to regain his old nature, his pure nature. Some speak of these things in allegories, fables, and symbols. But when we begin to analyze these statements, we find that they all teach that the human soul is in its very nature perfect, and that man is to regain the original purity now by knowing God. Just as the Bible says, no man can see God but through the Son. What is meant by it? That seeing God is the aim and the goal of all human life. The sonship must come before we become one with the Father. Remember that man lost his purity through his own actions. When we suffer, it is because of our own acts. God is not to be blamed for. Closely connected with this idea is a doctrine which was universal before the Europeans multilated it, the doctrine of reincarnation. Some of you may have heard of and ignored it. This idea of reincarnation runs parallel with the other doctrine of the eternity of the human soul. Nothing which ends at one point can be without the beginning, and nothing that begins at one point can be without an end. We cannot get believe in such a monstrous impossibility as the beginning of the human soul. The doctrine of reincarnation asserts the freedom of the soul. Suppose there was an absolute beginning, then the whole burden of this impurity in man falls upon God, the all merciful Father responsible for the sins of the world. If the sin comes in this way, why should one suffer more than another? Why such partiality if it comes from an all merciful God? Why are millions trampled underfoot? Why do people starve? Who never did anything to cause it? Who is responsible? If they had no hand in it, surely God would be responsible. Therefore, the better explanation is that one is responsible for the miseries one suffers. If I set the wheel in motion, I am responsible for the result, and if I can bring misery, I can stop it. It necessarily follows that we are free. There is no such thing as fate. There is nothing to compile it us. What we have done, that we can do, undo. To one argument in connection with these doctrines, I will ask your patient attention as it is a little intricate. We gain all knowledge over through experience. That is the only way. What we call experience are on the plane of consciousness. For illustration, a man plays a tune on a piano. He places each finger on each key consciously. He repeats this process till the movement of the fingers becomes a habit. Then he then plays a through tune without having to pay special attention to each particular key. Similarly, we find in regard to ourselves that our tendencies are the result of the past consciousness action. A child is born with certain tendencies. Whence do they come? No child is born with a tabula rasa, with a clean blank page on the mind. The page has been written on previously. The old Greek and the Egyptian philosophers taught that no child came with a vacant mind. Each child comes with hundreds of tendencies generated by past conscious actions. It did not acquire this in this life, and we are bound to admit that it must have had them in the past lives. The rankest materialistic has to admit that these tendencies are the result of the past action. Only they add that these tendencies come through hereditary. Our parents, our grandparents, and great grandparents come down to us through this law of hereditary. Now, hereditary alone explains this. There is no necessity of believing in the soul at all, because body explains everything. We need not go into the different argument and discussion of the materialism and spiritualism. So far, the way is clear for those who believe in an individual soul. We see that to come to a reasonable conclusion, we must admit that we have had past lives. This is the belief of the great philosophers and sages of the past and modern times. Such a doctrine was believed in among the Jews. Jesus Christ believed in it. He says in the Bible, before Abraham was, I am. And in another place it is said, this is Elias who is said to have come. All the different religious religions which grew among different nations under various circumstances and conditions had their origin in Asia, and Asiatic understand them well. When they came out from the motherland, they got mixed up with errors. The most profound and noble ideas of Christianity were never understood in Europe, because the ideas and images used by the writer of the Bible were foreign to it. Take for illustration the picture of the Madonna. Every artist paints his Madonna according to his own preconceived ideas. I have seen hundreds of pictures of the last supper of Jesus Christ, and he is made to sit at the table. Now Christ never sat at the table. He squatted with others, and they had a bowl in which they dipped bread, not the kind of bread you eat today. It is hard for any nation to understand the unfamiliar custom of the other people. How much How much how much more difficult was it for Europeans to understand the Jewish custom after centuries of changes and accretions from Greek, Roman, and other sources? Through all the myths and mythologies by which it is surrounded, it is no longer that the people get very little of the beautiful religion of Jesus, and no wonder that they have made of it a modern shopkeeping religion. To come to our point, we find that all religions teach the eternity of the soul, as well as that its luster has been dimmed, and that its primitive purity is to be regained by the knowledge of God. What is the idea of God in these different religions? The primary idea of God was very vague. The most ancient nations had different deities: sun, earth, fire, water. Among the ancient Jews, we find number of these gods ferociously fighting with each other. Then we find Elohim, whom the Jews and the Babylonians worshipped. We next find one God standing superior, but the idea differed according to different tribes. They each asserted that their God was the greatest, and they tried to prove it fighting. The one that could do the best fighting proved thereby that its God was the greatest through races were more or less savage, but gradually better and better ideas took place of the old ones. All those old ideas are gone and are going into the lumber room. All those religions were the outgrowth of centuries. Not one fell from the sky. Each had to be worked out bit by bit. Next comes the monotheistic idea. Belief in one God who is omnipotent and omniscience, the one God of the universe. This one God is extra cosmic. He lies in the heaven. He is invested with the gross conception of his originators. He has a right side and a left side, and a bird in his right hand, and so on and so forth. But one thing we find that the tribal god has disappeared forever, and the one God of the universe has taken their place, the God of the God. Still, he is only an extra cosmic God. He is unapproachable, nothing can come near him, but slowly his idea has changed also, and that at the next stage, we find a God immanent in nature. In the New Testament, or it is thought a Father who art in heaven, God living in the heaven, separated from men. We are living on earth, and we and He is living in the heaven. Further on, we find the teaching that He is God, immanent in nature. He is not only God in heaven, but on earth too. He is the God in us. In the Hindu philosophy, we find a stage of the same proximity of God to us, but we do not stop there. There is the non dualistic stage in which the man realizes that God he has been worshipping is not only the Father in heaven and on earth, but that I and my Father are one. He realizes in his soul that he is God himself, only the lower expressions of him. All that is real in me is he. All that which is real in him is I. The gulf between God and man is thus bridged. Thus we find how by knowing God we find the kingdom of heaven within us. In the first or dualistic stage, man knows he is a little personal soul, John, James, or Tom, and he says, I will be John, James, or Tom, or to all eternity and never anything else. As well might the murderer comes along and say, I will remain the murderer forever. But as time goes on, Tom vanishes and goes back to the original pure Adam. Blessed are the pure in the heart, for they shall see God. Can we see God? Of course not. Can we know God? Of course not. If God can be known, He will be God no longer. Knowledge is limited, but I and my Father are one. I find the reality in my soul. This idea are expressed in some religions and in others only hinted. In some they were extirpated. Christians' teaching are now very little understood in this country. If you will excuse me, I will say that they have been never been very well understood. The different stages of growth are absolutely necessary to the attainment of purity and perfection. The varying system of religion are the bottom founded by on are the bottom founded on the same ideas. Jesus say the kingdom to heaven or kingdom of heaven is within you. Again he says, Our Father who art in heaven. How do we or you reconcile the two sayings? In this way, he was walking to the uneducated masses when he said the latter. The masses who were uneducated in religion, it was necessary to speak to them in their own language. The masses want concrete ideas, something the senses can grasp. A man may be the greater philosopher in the world, but a child in religion. When a man has developed a high state of spirituality, he can understand that the kingdom of heaven is within him. That is the real kingdom of the mind. Thus, we see that the apparent contraindication and perplexities in every religion mark but different stages of growth, and has much and as such, we have no right to blame anyone for his religion. There are stages of growth in which forms the symbols are necessary. They are the language that the souls in that stage can understand. The next idea that I want to bring to you is that religion does not consist in doctrines or dogmas. It is not what you read, nor what dogmas you believe that is of importance, but what you realize. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they say shall see God. You in this life, and that is salvation. There are those who teach that this can be gained by the numbering of words, but no great masters ever thought that external forms were necessary for salvation. The power of attaining it is within ourselves. We live and move in God. Creeds and sects have their parts of to play, but they are for children. They last but temporarily. Books never makes religion, but religion makes books. We must not forget that no book ever created God, but God inspired all the great books. And no book ever created a soul. We must never forget that the end of all religion is the realizing of God. The end of all religion is realizing of God in the soul. That is the one universal religion. If there is one universal truth in all religion, I place it here in realizing God. Ideas and methods may differ, but that is the central point. There may be thousand different radii, but they all converge to the one center. That is the realization of God, something behind this world of sense, this world of eternal eatings and drinking and talking nonsense, and this world of false shadow and selfishness. There is that beyond all books, beyond all creeds, beyond the vanities of this world, and it is the realization of God within yourself. A man may believe in all the churches or in the world. He may carry in his head all the sacred books ever written. He may baptize himself in all the rivers of their of the earth. Still, if he has no perception of God, I would class him with the rankest atheist. And a man may have never entered a church or mosque nor performed any ceremony, but if he feels God within himself and is thereby lifted above the vanities of the world, that God, that man is a holy man, a saint, call him what you will. As soon as a man stands up and says he is right or his church is right and all others are wrong, he is himself all wrong. He does not know that upon the proof of all the others depends the proof of his own. Love and charity for the whole human race, that is the test of true religiousness. I do not mean the sentimental statement that all the men are brothers, but that one must feel the oneness of human life so far as they are not exclusive. I see that the sect and the creeds are all mine. They are all grand. They are all helping men towards the real religion. I will add, it is good to be born in the church, but it is bad to die there. It is good to be born a child, but bad to remain a child. Churches, ceremonies, and symbols are good for children. But when the child is grown, he must burst the church or himself. We must not remain children forever. It is like trying to fit one coat to all sizes and growths. I do not deprecate the existence of the sect in the world. Would to God there were 20 million more. For the more there are, there will be a great field for selection. What I do object to is trying to fit one religion to every case. Though all religions are essentially the same, they must have the variations or varieties of form produced by dissimilar circumstances among different nations. We must each have our own individual religion, individual so far as the external of its go. Many years ago, I visited a great sage of our own country, a very holy man. We talked of our revealed book, the Vedas, of your Bible, Quran, and of revealed books in general. At the close of our talk, this good man asked me to go to the table and take up a book. It was a book which, among other things, contained a forecast of a rain falling during the year. The sage said, "Read that." And I read out the quantity of rain that was to fall. He said, "Now take the book and squeeze it." I did so, and he said, "Why, my boy, not a drop of water comes out. Until the water comes out, it is a all book. So until your religion makes you realize God, it is useless. He who only studies books for religion reminds one of the fable of the ass, which carried a heavy load of sugar on its back, but did not know the sweetness of it. Shall we advise men to kneel down and cry, O miserable sinner that we are? No, rather let us remind him of their divine nature. I will tell you a story. A lion in search of prey came upon a flock of sheep, and as a lioness there. And as she jumped at one of them, she gave birth to a cub and died on the spot. The young lion was brought up in a flock, ate grass and bleated like a sheep, and it never knew that it was lion. One day a lion came across the flock and was astonished to see in it a huge lion eating grass and bleating like a sheep. At his side the flock fled and the lion sheep with them. But the lion watched his opportunity and one day found the lion sheep asleep. He woke him up and said, "You are a lion." The other said, "No," and began to bleat like a sheep. But the stranger lion took him to the lake and asked him to look in the water at his own image and see if it did not resemble him. The stranger lion, he looked and acknowledged that it did. Then the stranger lion began to roar and asked him to do so. Same. The lion sheep tried his voice and was soon roaring as grandly as the other. And he was a sheep no longer. "My friend, I would like to tell you all that you are mighty as lions. If the room is dark, do you go about beating your chest and crying, 'It is dark, it is dark, it is dark'? No. The only way to get the light is to strike a light and then the darkness goes. The only way to realize the light above you is or to strike the spiritual light within you and the darkness of the sin and impurity will flee away. Think of your higher self, not of your lower. Some questions and answers here followed. Question. A man in the audience said, "If ministers stop preaching hellfire, they will have no control over their people." Answer. They had better lose it then. The man who is frightened into religion has no religion at all. Better teach him of his divine nature than of his animal nature. Question 2. What did the Lord mean when he said, "The kingdom of heaven is not of the world, is not of this world"? Answer. That the kingdom of heaven is within us. The Jewish idea was a kingdom of heaven upon this earth. That was not the idea of Jesus. Question 3. Do you believe we come up from the animal? I believe that. Answer is, I believe that by the law of evolution, the higher beings have come up from the lower kingdoms. Question 4. Do you know the of anyone who remembers his previous life? Answer. I have met some who told me they did remember their previous life. They had reached a point where they could remember their former incarnation. Question 5. Do you believe in Christ crucifixion? Answer. Christ was God incarnation. They could not kill him. That which was crucified was only a semblance, a mirage. Question 6. If he could have produced such a semblance as that, would not that have been the greatest miracle of all? Answer. I look upon miracles as the greatest stumbling blocks in the way of truth. When the disciple of Buddha told him of a man who had performed a so called miracle, had taken the bowl from the great height without touching it, and showed him the bowl, he took it and crushed it under his feet and told him never to build their faith on the miracles, but to look for the truth in everlasting principles. He taught them the true inner light, the light of the Spirit, which is the only safe light of to go on. Miracles are only stumbling blocks. Let us brush them aside. Question 7. Do you believe Jesus preached the sermon on the mountain? Answer. To do better, believe. I do believe he did. But in this matter, I have to go by the book as others do, and I am aware that mere book testimony is rather shaky ground, but we are all safe in taking the teachings of Sermon on the Mountain on the mountain mount as the guide. We we have to take what appeals to our nearest or inner spirit. Buddha taught 500 years before Christ, and his words were full of blessings. Never a curse came from his lip, nor from his life, never one from Zoroastrian, Confucius, nor from Confucius.